The world can be unfair, but sometimes, fate has a peculiar way of rewriting destinies. Sophia Lane, a hard-working girl from the countryside, never imagined that her father's illness would lead her to an arranged marriage. Forced by circumstances, she agreed to marry Daniel Hayes, a man she believed was as poor as she was. Little did she know, beneath his humble disguise was a secret, one that would change her life forever. Sophia Lane stood frozen in the dimly lit hospital hallway, her fingers trembling as she clutched the medical bill. $50,000. A number so large, it blurred in her vision. Her father's life depended on it. A surgery he desperately needed. A surgery she could never afford. Tears welled in her eyes, but she swallowed them back. Crying wouldn't help. Working harder wouldn't help either. No amount of scrubbing floors or washing dishes could earn that kind of money in time. Then, the phone rang. A call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was calm. Cold. Matter of fact. There is a way to save your father. But it comes with a price. Sophia's breath hitched. Her heart pounded in her chest. A price? And then came the offer. A marriage. To a man she barely knew. Daniel Hayes. A man rumored to be as broke as she was. A man with nothing. No future. No fortune. No love to offer. A marriage with no promises. No affection. No escape. Her father's voice was weak when he spoke later that night. Sophia, please. Do this for me. She wanted to scream. To run. To fight. Instead, she nodded. Because she had no choice. And just like that, her fate was sealed. A wedding with no joy. A husband with no love. But what she didn't know was that Daniel Hayes was hiding a secret. A secret that would shatter everything she believed. The marriage happened faster than Sophia Lane could process. No flowers. No celebration. No love. Just a cold, emotionless exchange. A signature on a piece of paper. A deal. She stood beside Daniel Hayes, a man she barely knew. The man she had just vowed to spend a lifetime with. But there was no warmth in his eyes. No trace of happiness. Just a quiet, unreadable expression, as if this meant nothing to him. The officiant's voice echoed in the small office. Do you, Sophia Lane, take Daniel Hayes? Her hands felt ice cold. She couldn't breathe, but she forced the words out. I do. And just like that, she was married. A moment later, Daniel reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek black credit card, and placed it in her palm. Use this for whatever you need. His voice was calm, distant. No explanation. No emotion. Just those 5 words. Then, without hesitation, he turned and walked away. No wedding night. No conversation. Not even a glance back. The door shut behind him. Sophia stood there, staring at the card in her hand, confusion gripping her chest. A credit card? Why would a poor man have something like this? She ran her fingers over the embossed letters, the weight of it pressing into her palm. This wasn't just any card. It was heavy, expensive, the kind she had only seen in the hands of the rich. Something didn't add up. Daniel Hayes was supposed to be broke, destitute, a man with nothing. Then why did he act like none of this mattered? Why did he leave so easily, as if this marriage was nothing more than an obligation? And most importantly, where did all this money come from? Something was wrong. Terribly, terribly wrong. And Sophia Lane was now trapped in the middle of it. She just didn't know it yet. Sophia Lane wasn't going to live off a stranger's money. That credit card Daniel had given her, it stayed untouched at the bottom of her drawer, buried beneath old clothes, as if she could hide the unsettling questions that came with it. She didn't know where Daniel's money came from. She didn't know who he really was. And until she did, she refused to touch a single cent. So every morning, before the sun even rose, Sophia pulled on her worn-out sneakers, tied her apron around her waist, and went to work. She scrubbed floors, wiped down tables, cleaned up after people who didn't even bother looking at her. The hotel's hallways smelled of bleach and expensive perfume, 2 worlds that never mixed. One belonged to the guests. The other belonged to people like her. And they never let her forget it. Still working as a cleaner, Mrs. Hayes? The words dripped with sarcasm. A sneer followed. Sophia didn't look up. She didn't have to. She already knew who it was. Lena. She was one of the receptionists. Always perfectly dressed. Always wearing that smug expression. Married to a man and still mopping floors? Wow, that's sad. Laughter rippled around her. The other staff were watching, whispering, waiting for Sophia to react. But she didn't. She just gripped the mop tighter, forcing her hands to stay steady. Because the truth was, she couldn't explain. She couldn't tell them why she was still working, why she refused to touch her husband's money. Because even she didn't know the full story. Who was Daniel Hayes? Why had he married her so easily? And why did she feel like something was terribly wrong? But there was one thing she did know. No matter how much they mocked her, no matter how hard it got, she wasn't going to depend on a man she barely knew. Not until she found out the truth. And something told her that truth was going to change everything. Sophia never knew. Not when she sat beside her father's hospital bed, clutching his frail hand, fighting back tears as he slept. Not when the doctor came in with a smile, saying the surgery had been paid for, that her father's operation was scheduled, that she had nothing to worry about anymore. Not when relief washed over her so intensely, she nearly collapsed right there in the hospital hallway. She never knew who had done it, but someone had, and that someone was Daniel. From a distance, without a word, without expecting anything in return, he had taken care of it. No hesitation, no questions, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. And Sophia? She thought it was just luck. She thought maybe a charity had stepped in. She never even considered that the man she had married, the man who was supposed to be poor, struggling just like her, had somehow, quietly, covered the entire cost. Until she found out, until she saw the receipt. It was late at night. She had come home from work, exhausted, only to find a letter slipped under her door. No name, no explanation, just a single hospital receipt. Paid in full. By Daniel Hayes. Sophia's hands trembled as she stared at the paper, her mind spinning. How? Why? She grabbed her phone, heart pounding, and dialed his number. It rang. Once. Twice. Then, hello. His voice was calm, unbothered, as if he already knew why she was calling. Sophia swallowed hard. Did you pay for my father's surgeries? A pause. Then, softly, yes. Her breath hitched. He didn't deny it. He didn't even hesitate. She clutched the phone tighter. Why? Another pause. Longer this time. Then, because I could. Sophia's stomach twisted. That wasn't an answer. That was avoidance. She pushed forward. I'll pay you back. Silence. Then a quiet chuckle. Not mocking. Not amused. Just knowing. What's mine is yours. The word sent a shiver down her spine. He said it so simply, so naturally, as if money meant nothing to him, as if she belonged to him. And for the first time since they married, Sophia realized she didn't know who Daniel Hayes really was. And something told her she wasn't going to like the answer. The whispers started small, soft snickers in the break room, side glances, murmured insults just loud enough for Sophia to hear. She only got that rich husband by luck. But she's just sitting at home, spending his money. She acts like she's better than us, but she's still just a cleaner. Sophia ignored it. She had to. She scrubbed floors, cleared tables, worked twice as hard as everyone else, just to prove she wasn't looking for an easy way out. But it didn't matter. The harder she worked, the worse it got. And then, one day, it all came crashing down. She had just finished mopping when her supervisor stormed in, anger twisting his face. Sophia, you've been slacking off again? Sophia blinked. What? Customers are complaining. Dirty floors, unclean tables. You're not doing your job. Her heart pounded. That wasn't true. She knew it wasn't true. She had just cleaned the entire place. But before she could speak, her co-workers piled on. She's always taking breaks. I saw her standing around, doing nothing. Lies. Every single word. Sophia's hands curled into fists, nails digging into her palms. She wanted to fight back, wanted to scream that she had worked harder than any of them. But she couldn't afford to lose this job. So she took a breath and swallowed the pain. I'll do better, she whispered. Laughter. Mocking. But then, a voice cut through the noise. She's the hardest worker here. Silence fell. Everyone turned. And there, standing at the entrance, was him, Noah Blackwood, a man no one dared to ignore. The CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. A business tycoon with enough power to make or break careers in an instant. And right now, His sharp, calculating eyes were locked on Sophia. He stepped forward, his presence alone enough to send a wave of unease through the room. "I've been watching." His voice was calm, controlled. "And what I see is a woman who doesn't give up. A woman with integrity." Sophia's breath caught. Noah turned to the supervisor. "You want to punish an employee like that?" A flicker of panic crossed the man's face. Sir, I was just—" Noah didn't wait for an answer. He reached into his coat, pulled out a contract, and placed it on the nearest table. "I came here today to sign a deal with this company." The room held its breath. "But I don't make deals with people who don't value their workers." A pause. Then, slowly, he slid the contract toward Sophia. "You, on the other hand, you're the kind of person I do want to work with." Gasps echoed. Eyes widened. Sophia's own pulse hammered in her ears. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Noah Blackwood, a man she had only ever seen in newspapers and TV interviews, was offering her a deal? She barely found her voice. I don't understand." Noah smiled. "You will?" But before Sophia could respond, the door opened, and someone else stepped inside. Tall, silent, eyes dark and unreadable. Daniel. He had seen everything, and as his gaze met Sophia's, something flickered behind it. Something deep, something unreadable. And for the first time since they married, Sophia had the sinking feeling that her husband wasn't just watching. He was waiting. 3 years. 3 long years. Sophia had stopped waiting. She had buried the past, moved forward, built herself into someone strong, someone independent. And yet, when the elevator doors slid open that morning, when the murmurs of excitement filled the air, she never expected him. Daniel Hayes. He stepped into the office like he owned the place. Because he did. But Sophia didn't know that. Not yet. She was too busy stacking reports, adjusting her uniform, preparing for another long day of work. She didn't see the way the entire floor froze at his presence. Didn't notice how every employee straightened up, fear and respect shadowing their faces. Didn't realize that the man she had once called her husband, the man who had disappeared without a trace, was now standing just feet away, watching her. His gaze was unreadable. The same woman, but different. Her once timid frame now carried an air of quiet confidence. The exhaustion in her eyes had been replaced by something else, determination. She looked stronger. Stronger than the girl who had married him out of desperation. Stronger than the girl he had left behind. And then, "Sophia, hurry up with those reports. The CEO is back today." A voice snapped through the air, jolting Sophia from her focus. She didn't look up, just nodded, quick and obedient, as if the name meant nothing to her. As if the CEO was just another faceless figure she would never meet. Daniel's jaw tightened. She didn't know. Of course, she didn't know. For 3 years, he had stayed in the shadows, watching, waiting, and now, fate had placed her directly under his roof. She was working for him, every single day, walking into his company, completely unaware that the man she thought was a poor, ordinary husband, was the man who signed her paychecks. He exhaled slowly. No one spoke. No one moved. The employees held their breath, sensing the tension, the weight in the air. And then, Sophia finally looked up. Her gaze met his, and in that instant, time seemed to stop. Her fingers tightened around the reports. Her breath caught. Recognition flickered in her eyes. But she didn't understand. Not yet. Not fully. And Daniel simply watched, waiting, because the truth was about to unfold. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The air was heavy. Tension thickened like a storm about to break. Sophia stood frozen, her hands clenched into fists, her breath uneven. All eyes were on her, but not with admiration, not with respect, with scorn. Margaret Sinclair, the wife of a powerful investor, smirked, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "A woman like you has no place here." Her words dripped with contempt. "A charity case. A nobody. How did you even get into this company?" Laughter rippled through the room. Quiet, cruel. Sophia swallowed hard, forcing herself to stand tall. She had endured worse. She had been insulted before, mocked, underestimated. But this time, something was different. Margaret wasn't just another condescending elite. She wasn't just another voice in the crowd. She was powerful, connected, and she wanted Sophia gone. Women like you should know their place, Margaret continued, her voice sharp and unforgiving. Do you really think working here changes anything? Do you really think you belong in this world? Sophia opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, another voice sliced through the room. Cold, commanding. That's enough. Silence. Every whisper, every laugh vanished. Margaret's face paled. Slowly, every head in the room turned. Victoria, Daniel's godmother, a woman whose name alone held weight. Her presence was rare. Her interference? Unheard of. But here she was, standing between Sophia and Margaret. Her piercing gaze locked on a Margaret, unreadable, unwavering. I suggest you apologize, she said, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of undeniable authority. Margaret hesitated, then scoffed. Apologize? To her? She laughed, shaking her head. She's nobody. She is my godson's wife. Dead silence. The room spun. Margaret's face drained of color. The employees shifted uncomfortably, realization sinking in. Sophia barely breathed. Wife? She had almost forgotten the name still tied to her. She had almost forgotten the man who had disappeared. And then, a slow, deliberate set of footsteps echoed. The crowd parted. And there, Daniel Hayes stepped forward. No longer distant. No longer in the shadows. This time, he was undeniable. His gaze never left Sophia. But when he spoke, the entire room felt the weight of his words. My wife deserves respect. Gasps filled the air. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. People shifted, eyes darting between them, struggling to process the truth. The man they had all feared. The man they had all obeyed. I've been married to her all along. Margaret stumbled over her words. I didn't know. You didn't care, Daniel cut in smoothly. Then, he turned, facing the employees. The ones who had mocked, ridiculed, disrespected. His expression was unreadable, but his verdict was final. Anyone who disrespected my wife, he paused, can pack their things and leave. A deathly stillness filled the room. And then, panic, protests. But none of it mattered. The moment Daniel turned his back, security stepped in. One by one, the guilty were escorted out. Margaret was the first. Sophia watched in stunned silence. The same people who had once looked down on her were now leaving in disgrace. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel possible. And yet, as Daniel turned to her, his voice softer now, his eyes unreadable. Let's go home, Sophia. Her heart pounded. She had spent 3 years surviving on her own, 3 years believing she was nothing to him. But now, everything had changed. And the truth was only beginning to unravel. Sophia should have felt relieved. For the first time in years, the burden of survival had lifted. No more sleepless nights worrying about bills. No more cruel whispers about her place in the world. She was married to Daniel Hayes, the man everyone feared, the man with power, the man with everything. But instead of relief, she felt something else. Something heavier. Doubt, confusion, fear. Because this wasn't the life she had fought for. This wasn't her success. This was his world. And in his world, she was nothing but his wife. Sophia clenched her fists, staring at the expensive silk gown laid out on the bed. A personal stylist had sent it. Daniel's assistant had arranged her schedule. Luxury dripped from every corner of the penthouse she now lived in. But none of it felt real. Because in every whisper, in every lingering glance, she heard the same unspoken words. She's only here because she married him. Sophia felt it in the way the maids bowed, slightly lower than necessary. In the way employees hesitated before speaking to her. In the way strangers looked at her with quiet judgment, trying to figure out how someone like her had managed to marry someone like him. She had spent years struggling. She had worked herself to the bone to earn respect. And now, with one signature on a marriage certificate, the world had reduced her to a title she never asked for. The CEO's wife. Nothing more. Nothing less. Sophia exhaled shakily, pushing open the doors to Daniel's study. He sat at his desk, eyes scanning through documents, exuding the quiet, controlled power he always carried. He looked up the second she stepped inside. Something wrong? His voice was calm. Sophia hesitated. Then, finally she spoke. I want to keep working. Daniel studied her, his expression unreadable. You don't have to. Sophia's jaw tightened. That's exactly why I want to. Silence stretched between them. Then, Daniel leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving hers. You're afraid people will think you only have a place here because of me? Sophia's breath hitched. Because he was right. Because that was exactly what she feared. But she wouldn't admit it. Not out loud. So she straightened her shoulders and met his gaze head-on. I just don't want to rely on you. Daniel's expression didn't change. Then, after a moment, he gave a small nod. Then don't. Sophia blinked. What? You want to prove yourself? Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. Then prove yourself. There was no mockery in his tone, no amusement, just an unshakable certainty. You don't need my permission, Sophia, he continued. Do what you have to do. But remember, he stood, crossing the space between them in slow, deliberate steps. And when he spoke again, his voice was softer. You were never just my wife. Sophia's heart pounded. Daniel had always been a mystery. Distant, unreadable. But now, for the first time, she wondered, had she spent so much time proving herself to others, that she had never realized she had never needed to prove herself to him? And if that was true, then what did that mean for everything she had believed? Sophia had fought so hard to protect herself from being dependent. But now, she faced a terrifying question. Had she been pushing Daniel away? Not because she didn't trust him, but because she was afraid she did? Sophia never expected to hear those words. Not from him. Not from the man who had always been distant, controlled, untouchable. And yet, here he was, standing before her in the dim glow of the rooftop lights, his expression unreadable, yet somehow impossibly vulnerable. Daniel Hayes, the man everyone feared, the man with power, with wealth, with everything. And yet, in this moment, he looked like a man with something to lose. Sophia swallowed hard. She had spent so long trying to understand him, trying to keep her distance, trying to convince herself that this marriage had been nothing more than an arrangement, a transaction, a way to survive. But now, Daniel was looking at her with something she couldn't ignore, something real, something terrifying. Sophia. His voice was low, steady, yet somehow it made her heart pound. I need you to listen. Sophia wanted to step back, wanted to put up the same wall she had always relied on. But she couldn't move, not when he was looking at her like that, not when his words had already trapped her in place. I never married you out of pity. Sophia flinched. Because wasn't that what this had always been? A desperate girl, a powerful man, a marriage that had never been built on love. I fell in love with you. The words hit her like a shockwave. She stared at him, searching for some hint of hesitation, some sign that this was a mistake, a misunderstanding, a lie. But Daniel Hayes never lied. And right now, his eyes, they held nothing but the truth. From the moment I saw you, he continued, his voice raw, I knew you were different. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. I watched you fight for everything. Daniel took a slow step closer. I watched you refuse to give up, even when the world tried to break you. Another step. I watched you take care of everyone but yourself. Closer still. And I realized, Sophia could barely breathe. I didn't just admire your strength. Daniel stopped in front of her, his voice dropping to a whisper. I fell in love with it. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Sophia's mind raced. This couldn't be real. This wasn't how their story was supposed to go. She had spent years telling herself she didn't need love. That love was for people who had the luxury of choice. That survival came first. That guarding her heart was the only way to protect herself. But now, Daniel had taken every belief she had ever held and shattered it, because the one thing she had always feared the most was standing right in front of her, and she had no idea what to do. Daniel watched her carefully, waiting, hoping. Sophia opened her mouth, then closed it again, because for the first time in her life, she had no words. And worse, she had no escape. For the longest time, Sophia had run, not in the physical sense, but in the way that mattered most. She had run from hope, from trust, from the dangerous, terrifying idea that maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to want more. But tonight, there was nowhere left to run. Daniel stood before her, waiting. Not demanding, not forcing, just waiting. Because for the first time, this choice was hers. Not fate's, not desperation's, not survival's. Hers. Sophia inhaled sharply, her heart pounding. She had spent so long proving herself, fighting for every scrap of dignity, every ounce of respect. She had refused to be seen as weak, as helpless, as someone who needed to be saved. But now, staring into Daniel's eyes, she realized something. He had never seen her that way. Not once. Not even in the beginning. To him, she had never been a burden, never been a mistake. She had been his choice. From the very start. Sophia's throat tightened. Because now it was time for her to choose. The weight of the past still clung to her, whispering doubts. But for the first time, the voice of fear wasn't the loudest. Something else had taken its place. Something stronger. Something undeniable. Sophia lifted her gaze, meeting Daniel's. And for the first time, she didn't run. Not from him. Not from herself. Not from this moment. Slowly, she stepped forward. Daniel didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't dare to hope. Until Sophia reached for his hand. And when her fingers finally curled around his, the tension shattered. Something broke inside of him. Inside of her. Not in a way that hurt, but in a way that set them free. Daniel exhaled sharply, his grip tightening. Because this was real. This was hers. This was theirs. And when Sophia finally spoke, her voice was steady, stronger than it had ever been. I'm not here because I need to be. She held his gaze. I'm here because I want to be. And just like that, the past didn't matter. The doubts didn't matter. The fear didn't matter. Because what had started as an obligation had become something unbreakable. And this time, it was forever. Sometimes, life's most unexpected turns lead to the greatest love stories. Sophia Lane and Daniel Hayes' journey proves that true love is not about wealth or status. It's about understanding, respect, and standing together against the odds. What do you think, viewers? If you were in Sophie's shoes, what would you do? Could you forgive the lies and stay for love? Or would you walk away to protect yourself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you think. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. There's so much more to this story, and I can't wait to share it with you.